All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, few and far between. My name is Patrick DeMar, and this is the very first episode of a sports podcast that I'm going to be uh, running and pioneering, trailblazing. I don't know, whatever the word is. It's something I'm trying, it's something I've wanted to do for a while. Here we are. I just got done having a conversation with a couple friends of mine about Major League Baseball, talking about sort of where some teams are in the standings, World Series odds, All Stars. We had a great conversation as well, talking about our 5 most influential players of all time. However, all baseball is the main subject of today. It's not the main subject that I'll be running with for this podcast. I want to try to do a bunch of different things, talk about a bunch of different things, not just sports, branch out to other things I'm passionate as well about, whether it be music, movies, pop culture, whatever, pretty much whatever I want to talk about. I want to make this a space to do that with and to do it with friends, people I share conversations normally with on those topics, and people who I have conversations with that I think others would want to hear those conversations, if that makes sense. So here we are today. Whatever you see here on this first episode, hopefully things will progress and get better. Again, this is the first. I don't really have a great setup here at the moment. I got this microphone and some cables and whatnot literally like today, and it's a work in progress, but it's progress is being made. We're here. We got our foot in the door and we're going from there. So feel free to join along for the ride, share with friends if you like sports. I don't even have a name for this thing yet. I'm kind of just going for it. So here we go. First thing I want to talk about before I bring that baseball part of the podcast into it, I want to talk a little NBA free agency. Free agency opened up today, and just a few hours before free agency opened up, Kevin Durant, all-star forward for the Brooklyn Nets, announced he's looking for a trade. This didn't really shock me after Kyrie, announced he would be opting in to his contract this season with the Nets. I've seen a bunch of different takes as far as places people think he may end up. Kevin Durant, that is. A lot of people are saying as well that there's a good chance that Kyrie is moved as well as KD. So I spent the last a little while digging through the NBA trade machine, trying to piece together deals that I think make sense and that I think teams actually may do. And breaking down the list, I saw a report saying that like half the teams in the league called the Nets pretty much right after KD announced he was looking for a trade. And going through pretty much every team in the league, there's certain teams where you can see, all right, the cap situation makes sense. They've got some assets. And then you have other teams where it's like, this is a little more 50-50. And then others that just don't really have a chance. So I broke it down. I think there's really realistically, there's probably anywhere from 8 to 10 teams that could actually make a move for Kevin Durant. I think there's really only, let's call it 6 or so teams that will actually make a move, may actually make a move. First of all, I'm ruling out the Celtics, the hometown Celtics. It's my hometown team from Massachusetts originally. Jaylen Brown for KD plus a whole bunch of others is something I saw. The Celtics could make that work cap wise, but I really don't believe that's the direction they want to go as a franchise. If I'm Brad Stevens, I'm thinking I just made it to the finals with Tatum and Brown, and these guys are only 24, 25 years old. It's not like they're hitting their peak, their prime years yet. Keep building with us. Keep building with these guys. We've shown now that we can make it to a finals. We need a few more pieces to take that next step. But with free agency coming in, there's a bunch of guys that they can make a move for with a mid-level exception. And I don't really see them making a KD move. It's not really a direction I see they're going in. So I'm ruling them out. The next team I'm ruling out is the Mavericks. I think Durant and Luka would be a great, just dynamic offensive scoring combination. And those are two of the most talented players in the game. And immediately they would become the biggest threat to Golden State if they were to pull that move off. But if you look at Dallas's assets, there's just not really the guys to make it work. Just looking at the trade machine now, it's like you have Spencer Dinwiddie, you have a couple other guys here and there. Dinwiddie is one who's got like 20 million on the books. You could throw Tim Hardaway that direction, Christian Wood, maybe Reggie Bullock, all guys making $10+ million, but none of those guys are someone you want to have as a centerpiece of a deal coming back for Durant. Now, Luka is under contract for 5 years, and Durant will be under contract for the same amount of time. So essentially, what the Mavericks could do is just pretty much make the salary match and then just send basically every first round pick that they have for the next 5 years over. It's something you have to keep in mind as well with these conversations. DeJounte Murray from the Spurs just got traded to the Hawks for Danilo Gallinari and then 3 unprotected first round picks. DeJounte Murray's never even made an all-star team. So if a guy who's not even an all-star, who's going to be starting in the backcourt for a potential playoff team, is getting moved for 3 unprotected firsts, what does one of the greatest scoring wings of all time go for? How many picks are going to be going in that? What kind of players? So you really have to look at what these teams may or may not have in their locker that can make these deals work. Other teams I considered, the Raptors, the Pelicans, the Bulls, the Jazz, the Suns, the Heat, and the Bucks. The Raptors, you could argue that really to make the salary work, all they have to do is move Pascal Siakam. And they've got, a bunch of championship pedigree on that team left over from a few years ago that they could hang on to. Fred VanVleet is still there. OG Anunoby. Chris Boucher, I believe, was on that title team. I could be wrong from a few years ago. But, you could move Siakam. I would try to hold on to Scotty Barnes if I could, if I was the Raptor, just because he is a very talented player. He had an incredible year this year as a rookie. I think Toronto would have the pieces to make it work. I don't know if I see it happening because, again, I think the Nets are kind of factoring into this. How happy will Durant be? They're kind of trying to make it a smooth transition for him somewhat, because the way this is working, whichever team is going to be taking on Durant, they have to think, all right, we need to be able to compete for the duration of what's left of his contract, because otherwise we could just end up doing this dance another couple of years down the road. Who are we trading him to if he's unhappy? So the Raptors, I think, are maybe a dark horse, but not really one of my favorites. The Pelicans, same kind of deal. I actually think this is one of the more interesting possible landing spots, because if you're looking at their roster, the first name that jumps out to you is Zion. Yes, Zion didn't play any games this past year, but he was still the first overall pick a couple years ago. He still has a ton of talent. He's an athletic specimen. He's someone you can build around. Now, the rest of the salary would get interesting from there. You could maybe throw in Jonas Valanciunas. You could maybe throw in Jackson Hayes or Larry Nance Jr. or something, but then you're going to have to throw in a whole bunch of picks on top of that. I think the Pelicans, because of the assets they got back in the AD trade a few years ago, as well as having a guy like Zion, having another young player like Hayes, you can maybe make it work. They've got a decent core to build around already. Ingram, McCollum, some of their younger players are great as well. Jose Alvarado. I don't think that's impossible, but again, I don't think it's one of the more likely situations. Ingram and Durant are also super similar players, super similar body types. It's an interesting one for me, but I don't know how likely it is. The Bulls, the Bulls could make it work. It's kind of like either they're giving up Levine in a Sidon trade, and if they do that, they're probably giving up, I don't know, one other player and then a whole bunch of picks. But what's more likely for them is trying to give up DeRozan, Kobe White, or Patrick Williams, and then a whole bunch of picks. I don't hate this destination. I would say it's probably the fifth most likely, fifth or sixth, purely because Chicago can make it work from an asset standpoint. And depending on what happens with Kyrie, LaVine might end up being one of the better players that Brooklyn could get back in this whole situation. I'm going to talk about the Suns and the Heat next before I get to the deals I would actually like to see. The Heat is an interesting one because with the Heat, first of all, you need to give Jimmy Butler his respect. Butler led the team to the finals in the bubble a couple years ago. He led the Heat to one game away from the finals and really one shot away from the finals this past year. And that was even with, you could tell he was gassed throughout the series. You could tell he was playing hurt for a while. He had an absolute no-show from some of his teammates in those games. I mean, Kyle Lowry was not in basketball shape at all. You could tell. With this deal, it's really just, it comes down to one specific thing. How highly do the Nets value Tyler Herro? Are the Nets looking at Tyler Herro and saying, this is a guy that I want back in a centerpiece deal for, this is a guy that I want as the centerpiece in a deal for one of the most talented scoring players of all time. I can build an entire offense around him. After that, you're probably, if you're saying yes to that, then you're including Duncan Robinson in that deal. You're including Kyle Lowry in that deal. And then some picks. And pretty much after that, I mean, that'll work. And, you know, the salary matches, but I don't know if the Nets really value Herro like that. And I don't know if anybody does. Yes, he's talented. He's a great scorer. He can create, but he's a no factor defensively, which we saw in the playoffs. Pat Riley talked about in his exit conference about wanting two-way players and kind of obviously hinted at Herro with that. However, the ulterior option for this, and I don't really see the Heat. The ulterior option for this is the Heat give up either Bam or Jimmy Butler in this trade and get KD back and give up a few picks anyways for him. I think that concept is way more interesting because it makes the salary more flexible. Theoretically, you wouldn't have to give up Herro in the deal if you give up either Butler or Adebayo. However, I don't know if Pat Riley in good conscience moves away from Jimmy Butler because I think he sees the work that he puts in. I think he sees what kind of competitor he is. And I think he understands that if he can find a way to pair Butler and KD together, that's a team that can win a championship. Adebayo, I think he would consider and strongly consider at that. But you have to be able to find someone else to plug into that role if you do that route. So that's kind of the caveat with the Heat. But the Suns can make this work easily. It's really just a matter of whether or not they want to tie that much money into Kevin Durant when they're already going to have money tied into Devin Booker and they're already going to have money tied into Chris Paul. In this deal, the Nets would almost definitely get back DeAndre Ayton. Jay Crowder would probably come back to the Nets in this deal. Maybe Mikal Bridges. Maybe Cameron Payne. I think it would probably be a deal that's centered around Ayton, Crowder, Bridges. There's going to be picks involved and maybe one more player. I think that's a possibility. Now, my two fun trades. This one is the one that I think is less likely to happen, but would be great just for memes and making everybody happy, including NBA Twitter. It's a 3-team trade. It involves the Nets, the Lakers, and the Jazz. And you probably already see where I'm going with this. The Nets and the Lakers will swap Russ and Kyrie The Lakers will also get back Seth Curry. The Jazz will be giving Nikhil Walker-Alexander to the Lakers, or to the Nets, excuse me, as well as Rudy Gobert. And the Jazz will get back KD. So this is a 3-team deal. In one sense, you are giving Kyrie what he wants in getting him back with LeBron. In the other sense, you're giving what the Nets want and cutting ties with him altogether. However, with that, you're bringing back Westbrook, or Westbrick, as everybody on Twitter calls him now. However, he's a former MVP, but he's also one of the highest paid players in the year this coming year, and is a walking miss from the field, more or less. And you're getting back Rudy Gobert, who, while he's an incredibly talented defensive player, the Jazz haven't been able to do anything with him in the playoffs. And with this deal, essentially, you're saying, as the Nets, this is Ben Simmons' team. We're going to ride with him this year. We're going to give it a shot. We're going to see what happens. We're going to build around the defense that he and Gobert bring to the court. And we're going to try our best to find other guys who can score the ball. Whether that's Westbrook running the offense and hawking up 30 shots a game from wherever, or maybe they bring in a few free agents. I don't know. On the Lakers side of things, I think this actually makes them a much better team. Say what you want about Kyrie, but he's a much more efficient scorer than Westbrook at this point in their careers, even if he's maybe only showing up to 50, 60% of the games. And you're also bringing in a guy like Seth Curry, who the Lakers need shooters at this point. You look at their roster, there's really just not that much depth. Like LeBron, AD, Malik Monk, Dwight Howard, Talon Horton Tucker, Kendrick Nunn, Wayne Ellington. It's like, all right, these guys can't win me a title. LeBron knows that. Why do you think he's so in on this deal? Why do you think he's trying to push to bring a guy like Kyrie in? Yes, he has a relationship with Kyrie already and has won a championship with Kyrie, but their relationship's been fractured and Kyrie's been Kyrie. So I think this deal helps the Lakers. The Jazz side of it is really interesting because on the Jazz side of it, you look at their roster, really the only thing holding them back in the past few years has been Gobert and the performance of the team in the playoffs. They were a 1 seed at the end of the year, not last year, but the year before. You bring in Durant, you pair him up with Mitchell, who's under contract for the same amount of time that Durant is. You got Mike Conley running the point, Bogdanovich, Jordan Clarkson. You got some other kind of interesting pieces further down the bench. I think this would be a good move for the Jazz. I don't know if it makes them a title-winning team, but it makes them better. It gets them into that conversation. I think it's an interesting deal. But the deal that I'm absolutely terrified of happening, if this were to happen, it would absolutely break the NBA, for one. And two, it would almost guarantee that our finals, the next handful of years, will be between Golden State and Milwaukee, unless the Celtics really have figured some stuff out. Chris Middleton, Grayson Allen, and every first round pick the Bucks own for Kevin Durant and Seth Curry. You'll notice again, I'm including Seth Curry in this deal. I think with the Bucks, they're recognizing, yes, if we had Chris Middleton in this previous playoffs, we may have beaten the Celtics in our series. We may have beaten the Heat in the series. We may have even gone on to win the title because Giannis is, however you say his last name, Giannis is an incredible talent. He's probably the most gifted and talented player the league has seen, just purely in terms of length, ability to defend and attack, and with the level of and what kind of teammate he is. He's like a modern day Kareem when I watch him. And again, I'm not old enough to have seen Kareem play live, but I've actually gone out of my way to watch a lot of game film, and the way they move on the court is super similar. I feel like, I don't know, man. Like that series that the Celtics had with the Bucks, every single game, watching the Celtics try to figure out a way to stop Giannis, it was like open heart surgery going down a 300-foot drop on a roller coaster. It was terrifying. And, I think the Bucks understand the team that they have already. And I think Middleton is a good player. A pretty damn good player, actually. However, Middleton's making $37 million over the next 2 years. Kevin Durant's only making $5 more million than him this coming season. And Allen is like a non-factor. He can shoot sometimes, but defensively he's a liability. Curry's basically a more experienced, somewhat better version than him. If I'm doing this deal, I'm getting slightly better versions of both of these current players. Middleton, a little bit younger, a little bit fresher. Sure, he was hurt to end the year last year, but he has less injury issues than KD. I'm legitimately terrified of this deal happening. Legitimately. KD and Giannis on the same team is an absolute nightmare scenario for pretty much everybody else in the league. I mean, name a scarier duo in the NBA if this happens. Harden and Embiid, I guess, but what else do they have? The Bucks were the NBA title winners just 2 years ago, and their roster is pretty similar to what it was a couple years ago. There's a few changes, yeah. But with this, you're improving. You're not staying the course. You're not banking on the same thing happening. And I don't really see Giannis leaving after his 4 years are up. They could probably bring him in for another. If they fail to do so, then they're still going to have KD for another year after that. That would be my number one spot for Kevin Durant to land, honestly. I don't know if it'll happen. But it would be interesting. That's for sure. So to recap, it's my most likely destinations for Kevin Durant this year with the trade. Number 1, Milwaukee Bucks. Number 2, the Phoenix Suns. Number 3, the Miami Heat. Number 4, the Utah Jazz. Number 5, the Toronto Raptors. Number 6, the Chicago Bulls. Number 7, the New Orleans Pelicans. Number 8, the Dallas Mavericks.